Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to have each and every one of you here on this session today, and we'll be doing something very, very magnificent today. And the reason why we are here is we are going to. It's an opportunity to have everybody on our systematic review community, the systematic review network for low and middle income country. Happens to be a very wonderful one, and we'll be doing something very spectacular, which is to ignite our series, which we've already started anyway. But today, what we'll be doing is we're going to be looking at what systematic review, what systematic review entails, and it's going to really be a very insightful one for anybody who is out there, and you find massive passion in systematic review. Now, to get us going, I'm going to start by talking about what the community is all about. Remember, we started the Systematic Review Network for Low and Medium Country. It was founded with the initiative to ensure that we promote the culture of systematic reviewing, in low and medium income countries. And it's very pertinent and essential that we share all the needed information that can actually help somebody out there. If you're out there and you're finding it very difficult to perform your systematic review, you really know how to dive into the insights, get the relevant articles, do the relevant review, and inform policy. So the idea is that this community is one that is tailored at arming healthcare professionals and everybody at all tiers of research to perform a much more quality evidence. So we're going to dive in straight into what we have for today, because we're going to be talking about we're going to be looking at the overview of systematic reviews in a nutshell, and it's one that promises to be a very, very insightful session. So once again, I want to really use this opportunity to welcome each and every one of us back to this community, Systematic Review Network for LMIC. And one of our what's going to be our next fundamental, what's going to be the next fundamental component of our interaction today is fundamental. What's going to be the next fundamental component of our interaction today is going to be the overview of systematic reviews and the importance and application to research. So my name is Innocent David Chinachiram, and I'm the co-founder of synthesize research team, which we perform lots of evidence that are quite very pertinent for clinicians and researchers who actually need that critical appraisal for their systematic review or any other form of research evidence. So getting started here, still a massive welcome for each and every one of you. If you're joining us for the very first time, trust me, you're at the right place. This is where you're going to get all the information you need to know for performing your systematic review. And on the long course of this series, we're going to be keeping abreast with the diverse domains of a systematic review, and we're going to also be following what we call the PRISMA checklist to make sure we explain thoroughly all the information that you really need in that particular checklist. So we need to have an outline for our interaction today, and that is something that we're going to actually find very interesting. And the first thing we're going to be looking at, we're going to be understanding what is systematic reviews. We need to have an introduction of what systematic review looks like, and also it's going to be a very simple session tonight. We'll talk about some of the importance of systematic reviews. Then we'll look at some of the key components of a systematic review, and then we'll talk about how we can actually apply systematic reviews in research practice. Then we'll have a couple of practice exercises that we can actually go on with. Now, Before we talk about systematic review, we need to know what we understand. We need to know where is the systematic review placed on the hierarchy of evidence. Now, when you look at this diagram here, this is what we call the Pollitt and Beck. We call it the Pollitt and Beck, hierarchy of evidence for research. And when you look at this pyramid is a clear illustration of the hierarchy of evidence for any type of research evidence that you have out there. So if for any type of research work, starting from your doctor's opinion down to systematic review itself, you get to realize that all this hierarchy of all this pyramid is trying to illustrate is that this pyramid is trying to illustrate where and where do you find your research article. Where and where do you find that particular evidence that you're pushing? Let's say, for example, you have a research question on the usage of contraceptives among participants in sub-Saharan Africa, or maybe you're trying to look at the usage of contraceptives among female undergraduates in maybe in any country. Now, what this hierarchy of evidence illustrates is that at the base of this pyramid, we have what we call the case report, opinion papers, and letters. So this is what people are writing. Somebody can decide to put down a piece of writing or a piece of information on contraceptives among undergraduates. Maybe it could be a short commentary, it could be maybe an editorial, any form of letter, or it could be your doctor's opinion, what your doctor is saying about contraceptives among undergraduates. And what this means is that we are going to opinion what your doctor is saying about contraceptives among undergraduates. And what this means is that we are going to choose the next step of this pyramid over this next one. So it means that an animal trial or an in vitro study is going to have more, it's going to have more quality compared to what your case report is actually stating. And now the next tier of this pyramid is what we call the cross-sectional study. So it means that if we are going to put the findings from your article or a piece of article, which is believe the findings of the cross-sectional studies over an animal trial and over a case report. Animal trial and over a case report. Now, get where we're going to. Now, case control study is also another design. It's also what we understand to be another research design. So it means that looking at the Pollitt and Beck pyramid or hierarchy of evidence, a case control study has more quality over a cross-sectional study design. Now, when we talk about quality, we're talking about the rigorousness of this research process. So that means a case control study is more rigorous compared to a cross-sectional study, and a cross-sectional study is more rigorous compared to this, and this is also more rigorous compared to a case report or what we might call an opinion from an expert or a clinician, or a letter. Maybe sometimes we write letters to editors and it gets published. So all these things means that a cohort study is more rigorous than a case control, which is more rigorous than a cross-sectional. So it means that evidence from a cohort study is going to be more, it's going to have the more higher place on the, maybe on a clinical evidence or whatever, compared to a case control and a cross-sectional. And this is also what now leads us to a randomized trial, which is more rigorous compared to so many of these descriptions. Congratulations, a systematic review happens to be sitting at the top of the pyramid. So it means that if you're somebody out there and you're getting started with your systematic review publication, trust me, that systematic review is going to be is going to show more quality in terms of the quality of or the strength of his findings compared to what randomized control trial. I'm not saying that randomized trials or other primary studies are irrelevant. As a matter of fact, you can't perform a systematic review without majority of all these studies, unless it's an umbrella review, which the included study, the umbrella review, will still have all this in the build-up. So what point are we trying to drive home If you're new to systematic reviewing and this is your first time to hear about the systematic review, then what you need to understand is that the systematic review shows the strongest evidence. It's one of the strongest on the what clinical pathway, or maybe in terms of social findings. We are going to believe evidence from a systematic review much more than all of this. So it means that when you're climbing the ladder or the hierarchy of evidence, the more you're going up, the more stronger. The more you're coming down, maybe you decided not to do a systematic review now to do a cross-sectional study. So the more you're coming down, the more weaker. And if you understand that, you see that a cross-sectional study is usually done at a specific point. But when we are talking about a systematic review, it can actually collate findings around locations, but it has its own limitations. So these are the pertinent information that we need to do what understand before we get started with our systematic review. So if you're getting started with your systematic review, you are at the right channel, and this is the right place where you're definitely going to get all the detailed information that you need to get started with your systematic review. Trust me, that's fine. Now, cool. Now that we've understood the Pollitt and Beck hierarchy of evidence, which we've explained, now we need to ask ourselves, what is a systematic review? What do we mean by a systematic review? What's a systematic review? What is a systematic review? That is the question. Systematic review is just like a detailed methodological summary, of all the existing research in a specific question. So don't worry, I'm going to make a very detailed example and explanation of that with examples of some of my publications, or some publications out there on systematic reviews. So when you're talking about a systematic review, just think about a systematic review as whatever question your friend might have asked you today. Maybe you're just a student, or review as whatever question your friend might have asked you today. Maybe you're just a student, or a PhD student, or you're an undergraduate, or maybe a master's student, or a clinician, and you got a question today about how effective is PRISMA reducing the symptoms of malaria. Now, that can be a question. Let's go back to the Pollitt and Beck now. Now, that can be a question that can be tested as an experiment, because when we talk about randomized trials, we see them more like as an experiment. So in that situation, for you to understand the effectiveness of paracetamol in reducing the symptoms of headache, it means that if you intend to address that particular question using a systematic review approach, then it means that you need to go and pick up pockets of articles or primary studies that have addressed paracetamol in reducing symptoms of headache, then bring them all together to now have your systematic review. So systematic review is that basket. Then you have balls inside it that you will now use to generalize that this is now a ball or a basket filled with red balls. And that is why many a times when the WHO is publishing any finding, or when the WHO is saying what is the best drug in preventing or in managing certain health conditions, like maybe it could be HIV and AIDS, it could be malaria, it could be tuberculosis, it could be anything. Those evidence is not gotten as a result of case report. It's gotten from systematic reviews. When researchers might have collated findings, summarized findings, primary findings together, they would now conclude it to have what we call either a systematic review or a meta-analysis. But we'll come to that. Now the question now comes back to, why do we conduct a systematic review? It's very simple already. I just explained that. Whenever there is a confusion, so imagine conducting a systematic review when there is confusion. Now we're trying to know what are actually the determinants of preventing, or what are the determinants of maybe teenage pregnancy in sub-Saharan Africa. That can be a confusing question. Maybe we haven't seen any gap in research, or there is gap in research in terms of knowing the determinants of teenage pregnancy. In that situation, a systematic review is needed. We conduct a systematic review when we want to do what? Integrate or compile evidence from various studies. So you can think of any research question on your mind, anything. What is the cause of maybe dark spots on the faces of teenagers? It can be as stupid as that question. And you do what? You start conducting what? Collating primary studies together to now summarize, to now say that dark summarize lots of what? Study. So how does it really work? That is now the question. Cool. A systematic review works by following a what? A structured plan. For us to perform a systematic review, it can only work when we follow a structured plan, we search and we select studies and we synthesize it. So that is just these are just the summary of everything that you'll be learning throughout your course module in systematic review. The first thing you need to do is to do what? You get your question. What is the question? Your question could be, what is the prevalence of malaria in Africa? That's the question. And the next thing you need to do is what? You search databases. Maybe you search databases in Nigeria, in Africa, like Agile. Maybe you might search Shinal, you might search PubMed, you might search all this. Then you get studies and you synthesize and you join them together. Or you try to make meaning out of all the studies you've selected. And this is just what a systematic review is what all about. This is just how it works. And we to follow that structured plan, we can follow any detailed tool like what we call the PRISMA. I'm going to also project that on my screen. Then we can follow an AMSTAR checklist, any checklist that happens to be suitable for us in performing our systematic review. And what's now the impact? Remember, just like I talked about in the Pollitt and Beck hierarchy of evidence here. Now the impact now is that it's just going to provide us with high quality of evidence that shapes our clinical guidelines and influences what policy decision making. Because at the end of the day, if we don't have systematic reviews, it's going to be very difficult for clinicians, World Health bodies to make decisions because we have things happening in a lot of countries. Let's say, for example, now, this our team, this particular community now, which is the systematic review network for low and middle income countries. Let's assume we want to look at the global burden of cancer in low and middle income countries. For institutions like Global World Health Organization, they simply need evidence from systematic reviews to do what? To make that decision. And that is why systematic reviews has that impact because it provides the highest level of evidence and it's at the top of the pyramid. So that is why it's very important. Now let's look at a more clearer example of what is systematic review. Remember, I love comics. Everything about me is comical. Now, when we are talking about a systematic review, now, so it's just look, let's read my story, my very beautiful story. So imagine you're trying to find out what the best kind of ice cream is. So you ask all your friends to read ice cream reviews, right? So maybe most times, maybe probably I like vanilla, if any type of ice cream that contains vanilla, I really love it. And then you carefully look at all the answers. Now, a systematic review now is just like now for grown-ups now is that when we now gather together now, right? So we can now start asking the question of what is the taste of all these ice creams like? So it tastes salty, it tastes maybe milky. You've loved milky donuts or all those kind of stuffs, right? So this is what a systematic review looks like. So we give people ice cream, lots of them, or everybody's making ice cream. So start asking them, what is your experience about the ice cream? So want to understand everybody's experience. So want summarize making ice cream. So start asking them, what is your experience about the ice cream? So want to understand everybody's experience. So want to summarize their experience. That is what a systematic review is what all about. Just to a simple 9-year-old. So if you're out there and you're carrying a 9-year-old for this training, then sure, of course, they should have understood what a systematic review looks like. Now, to just make it more detailed and also more simple, what's the importance of a systematic review, which is what we need to understand. And it's just more of part of what we've just explained already in detail. It's much like Without systematic reviews, it will be very difficult to make decision making. Decision making is going to be very fierce and difficult. So we need to all the decisions that for you to know that metronidazole is an effective maybe parasitic medication or whatever, or any other example that you have there. It is because of what is systematic review. A systematic review has been performed lots of after maybe another gold standard that is also important in making decision can be randomized trial when you can perform experiment. But a systematic review is more higher now because it can now summarize lots of randomized control trials to get you what the overall quality of the evidence. Another thing that is it reduces what bias because of the strict methodology that it contains. It reduces what the biases that it tries to reduce some of this risk, particularly whenever we are summarizing our research findings. So you wouldn't want to miss out on some of this what pertinent, what important. And another thing there is that it facilitates decision making. Once we've got systematic reviews down, decision making becomes simple for stakeholders, becomes very simple for healthcare providers, becomes very simple for policymakers, researchers, and they get to make what informed decisions. So if you're in this community, this is the right place for you to do what? Start getting your systematic review manuscripts that is going to make it very simple and easy for you to start informing decision making. And I'm sure if you're out there, you would want to inform decision making. And that is just very simple because the only way you can inform decision making is by putting down your writing, your systematic review insights down, and you get it published, and you have the decision being what extracted from by relevant bodies or stakeholders or even researchers. Now, what are the key components of a systematic review, which is what we need to look at before we dive into practicals? Now, one of the key components of a systematic review is what? Research question. Remember when we talked about it in our first earlier session, we did mention that systematic review must contain a question, then we must do our search, we must screen, and we must do our data extraction. So, on the long course of our series, we are going to be looking at how we can use several frameworks like the PICOS framework, diverse of them, spider model, maybe lots of videos out there, to you can use some of these frameworks to get our research question formulated for systematic review. Because for you to get started in your systematic review, you need a framework to formulate a research question. And another thing that we're going to be looking at is what? The literature search. Literature search is also very important because we need to understand how to search diverse databases. There are actually lots of databases out there. We have the PubMed, we have the Cochrane Library, we have the Shina, we have the Medline, we have most of the library, we have the Shina, we have the Medline, we have most of them, they're actually out there, right? So for us to perform that search, we need to use predefined keywords. We put all those keywords into our search terms and we get our studies. So this is how it works. Then the next component, vital component, is what we call the screening. The screening and study selection. So this is also another very important process. We need to learn how to define our inclusion and exclusion criteria, identify relevant studies. How do we select studies? They are very, 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 very what? Massive and what? Important. Now, another aspect also which is not going to be left out is what? The data extraction. So these are just basically the four key parts of our systematic review, the data extraction and synthesis, because after we've selected those studies, we need to know how to extract those findings from what? Those studies, either qualitatively or quantitatively, because I've had numerous sessions sometimes when I actually teach people how to do meta-analysis, random effect meta-analysis, or maybe any other form of meta-analysis. So these things are actually really very what? Important in our what? Systematic review. Now, it still boils down further for us to talk about how to apply our systematic review. So, some of the applications of our systematic review in research, is still not different from what we've talked about. It starts from we use them to develop guidelines and recommendations. also for policy and development is also very pertinent because without systematic review, it's going to be very difficult to make policies. And whenever there are gaps in literature, systematic reviews helps us to do what? Highlight those areas where research is lacking. Because most times, maybe you just get to hit into the database, manipulate it with some of your keywords, identify gaps, and now we can say yes that these areas require what? Literature to be done. And now, so for us to get going, I'm just going to show us what a systematic review manuscript looks like. Quickly, I've just gotten that set. And now this is what a systematic review manuscript looks like. So we this is one of our meta-analysis that just got published just a month ago. So this is what a systematic review looks like. So if you're looking at this, this is a prevalence of antibiotic resistance in older adults and Alzheimer's disease patient, a systematic review and meta-analysis. So this was one of my papers that got published back in September, and this is a systematic review. So I just want to guide us through what the domains of this manuscript looks like, because definitely today they were just talking about the overview, what a systematic review looks like. We're not really explaining the details, the practicals of all the domains in this review process, but we're just saying this is what you're going to be expecting. This is what the final output, but we're just saying this is what you're going to be expecting. This is what the final output of what you're hungry about is. And it was published in the top 10 Journal of Alzheimer's Disease and Reports. And this is what the abstract of systematic review looks like. And this was the meta-analysis and the effect of a random effect meta-analysis that we performed. And this is usually the introductory part of it. Remember, these things can differ depending on the journal guidelines, but the structure remains the same. Now, I'm also going to show us, when I'm showing us that, I'm also going to show us what the PRISMA looks like. Now, remember in our slide here, we did mention that for us to perform a systematic review in getting started, we need a what? We need what? We need to follow a structured plan. And that structured plan is usually showed in the what? We usually make sure we demonstrate it in the methods. So a structured PRISMA reporting process was what? Followed. And this is what it looks like. I'm just still going to show us that. What the PRISMA checklist looks like. PRISMA checklist. So you could just type that on the internet. You could get that. So I'm going to choose the PDF version. So the PRISMA checklist is a 27 item document that we are going to be working with. But it's still very important for us to understand all this in the domain of of a systematic review or in the overview. So these are all what we'll be working with. So these are all the domains, content, the title, abstract, rationale, eligibility criteria, down till the 27th item, which is whenever you're getting ready to publish. So this is what the method section of a systematic review looks like. You have the eligibility criteria, which we talked about, the search strategy. You've got some of the search terms. You've got your study selection, data extraction, the characteristics of the included studies also is pertinent. You've got the risk of bias, which is also referred to as the quality assessment, and you have the results. You have the PRISMA flow diagram. We're going to also explain these in details during our sessions, showing the inclusion of 6 studies after 6 led to meta-analysis, and this is the characteristics of the included study. Then we'll have the risk of bias and the conclusion. So ladies and gentlemen, this is just all you need to know about getting started with the systematic review. And the most important thing you need to know is that at this point of being a basic or being an entry systematic reviewer, or even if you're at an expert level, then that's very fine. That's very fantastic. But what you need to understand is that for you to get started with your systematic review, you need to actually understand what a systematic review is all about. What is it all about? How can you be able to make something tangible out from writing your systematic review? And it is not different from all we've talked about. The only thing you need to do technically is to do what? Get started. You need to get your structured outline. What outline are you going to be following? So what else? What databases are you going to be searching? Looking at the domains that we've actually explained here. Where are you going to be screening for articles? Also, how are you going to perform your data extraction? So all these things are going to be explained in details in our what? In our future episodes, or in our future what? Interactions or discussion, so that we can be able to do what? Get accustomed to what the systematic review entails. And also that's going to make what? A whole lot of sense. So I can actually go on internet. What I usually tell students out there, if you're getting started with systematic review, is to read 10 papers on systematic review. So you can just go over into what? Google Scholar, which I can always do. And you can just type any random thing. I can just type malaria systematic review. So when you type this, you can actually open as much papers or as much systematic review papers as possible. Go through these papers, look at their what? Look at their domains, look at the way these papers were written. Try to look at some of the structures. Once you look at different papers, getting started, you find out that what? You're already what? On the track to what? Success. So in a nutshell, all we need to know is that what? The systematic review is not different. It's not really so technical from the routine studies that we actually what? Performing in our cross-sectional or in our primary. It's so technical from the routine studies that we actually what? Performing in our cross-sectional or in our primary studies. But what makes it distinct and more easier is that you can stay at the comfort of your home and review what? Literature. Once you're able to review literature using a structured guideline like the PRISMA that I talked about, like this checklist, then you're all there. All you need to do is getting your systematic review published is more easier, because once the reviewer goes through all the domains of your systematic review, they understand that what? Yes, this person has followed this checklist and it's now reproducible. In that situation, it makes it what? Easy to be what? Published. So I just want to keep it very simple for each and every one of you in this session, a very light session, which is just to understand what a systematic review entails and what it looks like. So I don't know if there are questions that I might want to entertain briefly. Okay, so I can actually see some of your messages on the live chat. Okay, okay. Yeah, yeah. Right now, I think right now you can see my. Okay. Okay, cool, cool. Yes. Yes. We're fortunate. Okay, I'm sure people can see my screen now. Okay, all right, all right, all right. That's fine. That's fine. Okay, yeah, sure. I'm going to share the slides. I'm going to share the slides on the community. So if you've not joined the community, on the link on this comment on the link, I'm going to share the slides for this session. And so thank you very much for your time. We're going to keep in touch with you people in our next session here on here on YouTube. So have a very massive day. Thank you so much. Yes, thank you, is Izini. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Have a nice time. Bye.